What up, y'all? Something a little bit different. Today I'm talking about the best value e-bike on the market today. Something I've recently purchased and love. This is the Lectric XP 2.0. Let's get into it. So in this video, I'm gonna break down some basic specs of the bike, what everyone should look for when shopping for e-bikes. I'm gonna tell you what I absolutely love, all the pros of this bike, and then stay tuned for the end for some cons and some must-do upgrades and accessories I bought. First, when it comes to spec, when you're looking for an e-bike, you should basically look at a couple really important things. Number one is the range. To me, that's really important depending on how long you want to ride for, where you want to go, up hills, and that sort of stuff. That comes down to two factors, the battery and the motor. When it comes to performance, this bike definitely delivers, but it's not the high end of the market. It's got a 500-watt rear hub motor. That motor is really powerful. It says it's rated up to 850 watts max performance, but I find it plenty for a guy like me, 6'3", 205 pounds. The battery charges up in between 4 and 6 hours. I find it closer to the 6-hour range, and it says it's rated to give you about 45 miles of riding. That's where things get a little bit tricky, and something you should know when shopping for e-bikes. The rated range that they give you is typically under the most perfect situations. For instance, this bike's got 5 different levels of power and pedal assist, if you will. Level 1 is the lowest. You barely feel it. You feel like just a little bit of assistance. It definitely won't get you up a hill or anything. And that's where this bike is rated at 45 miles. It's under level 1 without any hills on a rider that's probably 150 pounds. But for a guy like me that's 205 pounds, I like to ride under, level 3, level 4, sometimes level 5. That range is gonna dip down significantly. So here's a little breakdown I'm gonna give you, put it up on the screen right now. This is with pedal assist. You're looking at about 17 miles on level 5. Even under real world circumstances, that level even drops lower. I tend to find on level 5, twisting the throttle a little bit, not pedaling the entire time, I'm getting between 7 and 12 miles of range, which is significantly less than the 45 miles. So definitely do your research when looking at your e-bikes. But for my real world riding experience, I like to ride this at level 3, and I like to pedal majority of the time, but I do like to crack the throttle, especially when going up the hills, and just let the bike carry me. It does have very good power to get you up, pretty steep hills. And I usually get about 15 miles of range, maybe 20 miles if I'm really babying it and not using the throttle on its own. Now, some other nice upgrades for the 2.0, they've added a front fork with an adjustable suspension on the front. Now, I'm coming from the world of motorcycles and mountain bikes, so I won't say that this is the best suspension front fork I've ever ridden on, but it definitely does the job. It absorbs some, and it's far superior than the original with no suspension at all. It's rated at about 40 millimeters of travel and says to be adjustable, although I find that it's not very adjustable. You kind of just get the same dampening. But again, it does do the job, and it does absorb some of the bumps. Talking about speed of this bike, it is rated at 28 miles per hour with pedal assist, and I did hit that on a regular basis. I can get it up to that. But it's only about 20 miles per hour with throttle only, and I think that's a class 2 e-bike, which is supposed to be street legal in my area. Check your local laws for all that sort of stuff. But I have seen a lot of people with these bikes are able to manipulate them to open them up to get as fast as possible. I like the fact that these bikes are really popular. Lectric XPs are everywhere. They're all over the forums. So you can readily get parts and tips and tricks when things go wrong. And customer service is a nice thing with this company. So that's one plus that you get when going with the Lectric XP. A few other upgrades that I do like, the 2.0 has a beefier rear rack that's supposed to be able to hold 70 pounds of weight. I haven't really tested that out, but it does seem pretty sturdy. And then it's supposed to have a beefier frame on it to give you a little more sturdiness and a little more support and a little more smoothness in your ride. I don't notice a huge difference between riding the first one and the second one. The frames almost look identical. They also said to give you a little bit wider bars. Now, that is something that I do like and did notice from the 1 to the 2, but I will say that the bars are still a little bit narrow for me, and it was a learning curve. It felt a little bit unstable when I first got on the bike. I'm starting to get used to it more now, but I would like a little bit wider bars. I've seen some guys change the bars, but again, this is a folding bike, so the bars do collapse and fold down, and I found if I did upgrade or change those bars out, it would really reduce the amount of size I'm saving when I do fold the bike down, so that was a big fault for me. I just kept the stock bars on. When talking about folding this bike down, one thing to note, it does does collapse in half and the bars do fold down, which is nice. I can throw it in the back of my sedan or throw it in the trunk of an average sized car and just carry it around with me wherever I go. But I will say this bike is 68 pounds. It's not a light bike, so it does take a lot of muscle, a lot of elbow grease to get it up and into the trunk of a car. So if you are a smaller individual or someone with not as much strength, it is a little bit worrisome. Folding this bike might not be ideal for you, and you may not use that feature as much as you think because it's so heavy. But if weight is a concern for you, I would note that they do have a smaller version called the XP, or the light model, and that is, all around a smaller bike. It's about 20 pounds lighter than this XP, so definitely check that bike out if you are concerned with weight. Again, touching back on value, the XP 2.0 just has some things that are really nice finishing features like fenders and built-in brake lights and headlights that are connected to your controls on the bars, so you can turn those on and off without having to dismount off the bike. It is a nice bright headlight. I thought about upgrading it, but I rode in complete darkness and it was plenty bright for me to see and ride around almost at full speed, so really not a concern there. I also do like the electronics that are on the bike. The mounted LCD screen, it is small, but it does the job really well. It gives you your speed, your battery levels, your mileage, other things like it shows you when the headlight comes on and off, what power rating you're in, so it shows you your levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then it also does show you things like, the time or a running odometer that you could reset. So overall, just a nice job on fit and finish of the bike in general. You don't need much here. It comes with a kickstand and a little grab handle when you do fold it down. So overall, I really like the bike. Again, a fantastic value at $999. All right, so I've talked about the things I love about this bike. Now let's talk about the things I don't like and some necessary upgrades that I had to make, and I highly suggest you do too. My number one biggest complaint for this bike is that the brakes are very, very bad. They are mechanical disc brakes, and on paper they seem okay, but again, for a heavy bike that goes as fast as 28 miles per hour, I found the brakes to be lackluster at best. They were mushy, they wore down quickly, and they started making noise pretty fast. So I wanted to upgrade the brakes. That was the first upgrade that I think is absolutely mandatory if you're going to be riding this XP or XP 2.0, really any e-bike in general. For that upgrade, I went to a hydraulic disc brake. I'll link it in the description below. I found that these were just kind of a nice bolt-on plug-and-play unit where I didn't have to, upgrade the whole system. They are cable driven, so they bolted up directly to the XP. I didn't have to use any custom mounting hardware. I think I used a spacer on the front because it was rubbing a little bit close. But overall, these were a must-do upgrade. I even looked at replacement pads for the original mechanical disc brakes, and those pads cost about $30, $32 for front and rear sets. And these hydraulic disc brake upgrades only cost me $49 on Amazon. So definitely check out that link. Don't care what you buy, but definitely do upgrade the disc brakes. If you don't know, for the beginners out there, a mechanical disc brake just moves one side of the caliper against the rotor, but a hydraulic disc brake moves both sides, so it hits the rotor evenly. So there's just more stopping power. It wears more evenly, so the brakes last you a little bit longer, and they definitely don't squeak and give out on you as fast. So my next con is a design flaw. I don't like the charging port and the placement of the key on this bike. The key is on the bottom of the frame, so you can't see it at all when you're sitting or riding on the bike. That's a little bit annoying. So when it's parked, the key can easily fall out. And then also the charging port, I don't like the placement of it, and I don't like the little seal that they put over the charging port. It can easily get damaged and get hit or bent when the bike is plugged in. So it's bothersome to me. I wish they would move it so it's a little bit more of a safe, secure location and not so exposed. Another pretty big flaw I have with this bike is the throttle. Now, again, I'm coming from motorcycles and scooters and those sorts of things, so I'm used to a very responsive throttle. And this bike definitely doesn't have that. There's about a 1 to 1.5 second delay from the time you crack the throttle to when you actually feel the bike pulling you. And that is really annoying. It's something that bugged me at first. Definitely you get used to it and it doesn't annoy you as much. And I think the average consumer out there, if this is your first e-bike or you're not comparing it to other e-bikes, it's probably not gonna bug you and you get used to it really quick. But for me, used to a very snappy, responsive throttle, it did bug me, especially when you're riding on throttle, then you get off and you wanna get back on. Sometimes in just certain riding situations, whether you want to get in front of an object or whatever it is, you want that power to come on, and it definitely takes a second, and you're waiting and it's slowing down, and then it kind of hits. So it is a con for me. It bugged me, but something that maybe you won't notice as much. In tandem with that, another con that I have is the bike does struggle when it's going up steep hills. Now, that is something that's bothersome for me because there are a ton of hills around where I live in Southern California. And for you, maybe your terrain isn't as hilly, but for me, I found that the bike takes a lot of power and drains the battery very quickly when riding up these hills, and I needed to give it a lot of pedal assistance to get it up anything more than I'd say 35-degree hill. So that is something that kind of annoyed me with the bike. Only way to solve that problem is to get a bike with more power and a beefier battery, so you're talking about spending a lot more money. And even in touching in that, I looked at the Super 73 and the Rad Power bikes, and a lot of these bikes that are out there that have much beefier specs and more power, and you're almost looking at double, if not 3 times the cost. So I will say, you know, although it is an annoyance when it comes to hills and those sort of things, it's definitely not an annoyance enough for me to spend 3 times the amount to get a Super 73 S2. So, you know, take that for a grain of salt. Still 100% the best value out there, and I still highly recommend it, but it is a con to note. Up next, a must upgrade for me was the saddle. The seat is rock hard, and again, this is a hardtail bike, so there is no rear suspension. So I find myself, especially running at higher speeds, hitting bumps. It really does take a toll on my old back, but it will just bother you if you're hitting on bumpy roads. I'm taking this thing, you know, on dirt roads, on mountain bike trails. I'm just ripping everywhere, jumping off curbs. So I did notice it really quickly that I would like a softer saddle. So I upgraded to this Cloud9 C9 saddle. I'll link it in the description below. And it's got some rubber bumpers on the bottom of it to give you some suspension, and it did make a big difference. But even more so than that, I replaced the seat post with a suspension seat post, so it's got a little dampening in it. It's supposed to be adjustable. I love this thing. There are really expensive adjustable seat posts out there with a suspension, but this was only $49. I got it on Amazon. Huge must upgrade. It really changed my whole riding on this bike. I could ride from an hour to just as long as I wanted because there was so much dampening with this combination. Huge upgrade. Another con I want to talk about is that when the bike is folded, it does scratch against itself, so it will damage itself. If you're putting it into the trunk of a car or in the back of a pickup truck, the rear tire, when it's folded flat, is going to rub against the front fork and the frame of the bike, so it is going to cause damage on itself. So maybe you put a blanket in between or something like that. Also, when it is folded up, it's just flapping around. It doesn't lock into place at all. So I like to carry a couple bungee cords to bungee it up against itself, because that's, again, something that's not a very good design flaw. When it's in the back of a truck, it's going to flap around or anything like that. So that is a con. In closing, when I'm talking about the best e-bike on the market or the best beginner e-bike, I'm definitely recommending you look at the XP 2.0. At least it's a good starting point. For $999, this bike is an incredible value. Again, anything comparable to this, you're gonna look over $1,600, $1,700. And another thing I wanna talk about is that I actually bought this bike used. I found it on Craigslist in my local market. I got it for $700. You really cannot beat that. And the XP, even the original XP, although it does have not all the features and fit and finish of the 2.0, still a fantastic value. I'm seeing some of those go for $500 used. So definitely check your local Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for these bikes. Click the link below. It really helps me out if you want to check out the brand new versions of these. If you have any questions or anything, tips and tricks I can help you with, drop me a comment below. I appreciate you guys. If you enjoyed this video, hit me with a thumbs up. Stay tuned. I'm also going to drop my top 5 best accessories I've purchased for the XP 2.0. I appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Peace.